Hello, hello, hello. Welcome to this week's episode of the Imaginary Movie Podcast with three hosts. A podcast where we watch a movie and then we talk about it. And this week, stealing presumably Sam's intro as well, we are watching one of the great Martin Scorsese, Robert De Niro features. No, it's not Taxi Driver. No, it's not Raging Bull. No, it's not Goodfellas. It's not The Irishman. It's not Casino, or any of the other four movies the two of them have made this week.
Hello, my name's Sam, and bake 'em away, toys. We could talk a bit more about that.
And I'm Ross. I don't have an intro prepared for this. My eyes have been burned. The image of this movie has been burned into my eyes, my skull, my soul. I felt both filthy and, fortunate to have watched this movie. And my God, was it an experience.
Wow, Ross is really that's serious off the bat.
Came like that.
Straight in there.
So this week, we watched the Simpsons episode Cape Fear, and then we're going to talk about it. No, we watched the 1991 remake of a 60s movie called Cape Fear that was later remade into a Simpsons episode titled the same.
Which is, let's talk about one of our favourite topics that we talk about on the podcast, cultural osmosis. So I'm going to fully admit right now that up until the point that we started watching this, I was not aware that episode of The Simpsons was parodying this film or the 60s remake. So I've watched that episode of The Simpsons hundreds of times. That's what I used to do, is just stream through seasons 1 to 9. The reason we watched
this is because, honestly, the day that we did our super secret podcast process of picking episodes
lottery,
I've been watching season 5 of The Simpsons, so I'd watched this episode, and I was like, and again, I'd never seen Cape Fear, this film at all, but I've seen The Simpsons episode a dozen times and more. And I was like, and I vaguely knew there was a movie called Cape Fear that this was based on, but apart from that, I knew absolutely nothing about this film. I didn't know it was Scorsese, a director who I really like. I didn't know it was Robert De Niro, an actor who I really like.
I don't I'm even worse than you guys, because I hadn't, I was aware of that Cape Fear was a movie. I'd never seen it, didn't know who was in it like you did.
You're aware that movies are a thing.
I'm aware that cinema exists. But I thought that Simpsons episode, by the way, we've mentioned The Simpsons 8 times and we've been live for 4 minutes. But I thought that particular episode, I thought it was just a really good Sideshow Bob episode. And I'm trying to remember, was it a Halloween special or something? Either way.
No.
But like you said, Sam, the music and everything, as soon as I started watching this movie, I was like, holy shit, this isn't an homage to Cape Fear. They ripped off Cape Fear and they just replaced the characters.
Like 3 years later as well.
Amazing that they
40
were not
minutes
sued.
off it and just made it a Simpsons episode.
Yeah, so Cape Fear, this is not a movie that I knew anything about. Didn't know it even existed really until we started watching it. But it's a film that I think has captured all of us and has made us not only reflect on the episode of The Simpsons that this was parodied, but also just this is a whole film that completely passed me by, and watching it was a treat. This is as good as cinema, as popular cinema gets. I think this is quality. Absolutely.
I mean, one of the things Dave said when we were messaging each other, and this isn't to take shots at Dave, but he was saying, it's a good movie, but there are bits where you could, it's sort of it's a cinema movie. And I'm paraphrasing what you said there, Dave.
By paraphrasing, he means misconstruing my sentences entirely.
No, I mean I can quote. I mean, it got really dark, with the Nazi party and stuff. I didn't want to bring that up, but anyway.
Ross, why do you always have to bring up the Nazis, man? It's okay. They don't have to have an input on every single podcast we do.
They have some good points. I have to leave the conversation.
Ross, if anyone's watching the YouTube stream of this, tell me which one of us looks like a white supremacist. Just for no other reason. I'm throwing some bold shade right now.
I was about to play along, Dave, and put my hand up. I was like, don't do that. All right, guilty. Don't do that. But what I was going to say about the movie...
It was a good start.
Already 10 minutes in, demonetized.
Don't we have to be monetized to be demonetized?
Yeah, we're not making any money
Complex,
now.
like mob accounting.
But getting back to my point, like this movie,
Serious talk.
yeah, what genuinely it should be like lauded and praised because some of the topics it touches on, like Sam, you mentioned grooming, and you were like 20 minutes ahead of me when watching this, and holy crap, yeah, it nails what grooming is. Talking about like how corruption is in sort of in the judicial system, not to mention how I don't know if it's the judicial system is the right term or just how lawyers are, but like when the sheer doubt for basically people who are victims of sex crimes and how basically they rake them over the coals. That's already a harrowing experience, and they make it even worse for them. This movie from 30 years ago absolutely nails like sort of highlighting these things. And like I didn't learn about these things, or I wasn't made aware of these things then, like for at least 2 decades later.
Americans have been miscarrying justice for just over 200 years, Ross, and the rest of us have been doing it for a hell of a lot longer.
We've already mentioned Nazis, Dave. Let's not go there, man. Come on.
No, genuinely, because I kind of agree with what you're saying, Ross. What I meant by that when I said about this movie was that I think this movie maybe lacks like a centralized message, a really like strong message in the core of it to be like a classic movie that you'd watch again and again. Like I think this movie is fantastic. However, I think it's maybe just like that little bit looser. If you compare it to a movie like The Shining or Misery or even The Shawshank Redemption, like I just think it lacks that really strong like foundation that makes those movies very rewatchable. Whereas this is kind of like I'm not sure I'll watch it again. I mean, I could because my God, is it 2 hours and
4 minutes?
14.
Oh yeah, there you go. It's 14. So let's give a little bit of a plot summary. In this film, a convicted rapist released from prison after serving a 14-year sentence stalks the family of a lawyer who originally defended him. As we say, Martin Scorsese, which we probably should have seen this. Like I've seen most Scorsese films. Yeah. There's not that many that I haven't seen, and this is one of them.
We probably should have seen it, Sam, and we probably should have known it was a Scorsese film before we'd watched 20 minutes of it.
Yes.
Like I was like, who directed this? Because they're doing a really good job.
Well, that is a really good point. It's a really good point.
I want to highlight as well. It's not critical, but I want to highlight that the synopsis there on IMDb is vastly different to the synopsis Netflix gave me, because they just told me, "Oh, a convicted criminal, torments his defense lawyer." I was like, "Oh, this could be good." Not a convicted rapist, because Netflix sort of buried the lead there a little bit.
Yeah, I don't think Netflix wants that word on its
Netflix
algorithm.
has a series of like no words. They're like, we just can't have it. We can have the movies, but we just can't have that in the descriptions. We're a nice service. We offer nice things.
Family entertainment. So where do we want to begin with this? I'm going to maybe suggest
I was going to say before we talk about the movie itself, I was going to say maybe we could talk about the genre in which we think this movie sits now, before we talk about the content of the movie, because this movie kind of like it situates itself on the thriller spectrum, but at maybe the horror end of the thriller spectrum. Where, like, again, let's compare this to a movie like The Shining, because I saw it really recently, and also because Jack Nicholson's performance in that is very reminiscent of Robert De Niro's performance in this in terms of like the psychotic energy. The only reason I think this is called a thriller is because there's absolutely no supernatural like thing here. This could be like a Saturday night horror movie, and this he could be hunting teenagers in the woods with this same kind of like energy.
I wonder, like, I don't know if it was a term at the time, but like, psychological thriller is what springs to mind with me, because this guy toys with his mind. And like, because thriller is what it was, like, scary movie, it's a horror movie, but it was also like tagged to thriller. But this is so much out of its league. I mean, obviously, Scorsese, you're gonna step it up, aren't you? But psychological thriller is what I would deem it as.
Yeah,
I'm gonna call it melodrama. That's what I'm gonna call it, because I think this is a film that follows a very, very.
I don't think there's much mellow about it. So.
but melodrama is like is a piece of a melodramatic film is like over exaggerated, intended to like to get to the core and to make you feel things, and like everything's turned up to 11 with exciting situations, exciting characters, kind of unrealistic. And I think there's a lot of this film which is not very realistic. And I think if you went through with our pedant cast lens, there'd be. Oh no, yeah, but I'd like to really restrain that, because I think it's a style of film that we're looking at. There's a lot of things that you think that wouldn't happen. How would he stay on the bottom of that car for 400 miles that they drove?
Well, he had a belt and the handcuffs, but that's what.
But you know what I mean. Like, there's lots of things you got.
But before you done yourself in there, Sam, with that last statement, I was actually like, oh, actually, Sam's got a point here, and then you just ruined it.
No. But what I'm saying, I think this follows a vein of filmmaking which is very much which we saw back in the 60s. The first thing that I thought, even in the opening credits, I thought Hitchcock. And all the way through Hitchcock, I was like, wow, this is... And then, of course, because I'm a fucking genius, I read on Wikipedia where it said, this is inspired by Hitchcock. And Scorsese was very much...
The Imaginary Movie Podcast in no way endorses Sam's opinion that he is in fact genius. And,
I am a genius.
And does not, in fact, state that itself.
But to move away from my genius for just 1 second, I think
manage that.
Yeah, I think that the Hitchcock feel of this, and if you've ever seen Rear Window, there's only something a few things that this podcast can achieve, and I think detracting from my genius is not one of them that's going to happen tonight. If you've ever seen Rear Window, Rear Window,
I've missed the three of us meandering off topic. just
Rear Window, Vertigo. Have you ever seen Vertigo? That's a Hitchcock movie. I mean, Vertigo is so like this. It's so like this. And I think that is that vein of melodrama. I think this is what it's doing, and I fucking loved it. I loved it for that. I love the style. I love the feel. I love the way the characters are not realistic. No one acts in a realistic way in this. I think that adds to the feel of this film so much.
I mean,
I think these characters are realistic, Sam, in that they are utterly unlikable to an actor. Nobody in this movie is likable. And guess what, Sam? Most people aren't fucking likable. That's right, audience. I can see 0 people watching on YouTube. None of you are likable.
Yeah. Where's our viewpoint?
Fuck you.
Yeah.
Again, I think we were demonetized, but I'm waiting for that money to arrive so we can take it away.
That's our Christmas message, and from all of us here, fuck you.
So it's this starting point. I think is that if you go into this, and to your point, Dave, about this being not particularly memorable and not like a film that maybe doesn't stay with you. You know, those films that you think about, and it happens to me all the time. But you'd be doing something a day and you think, oh God, yeah. Like that bit in Shawshank Redemption, it'll just pop in my head. Like there's it happens all the time, and I think this is maybe
related, Sam, directly to the fact that this is a Martin Scorsese and Robert De Niro movie, made in 1991 after they made Goodfellas.
Peak.
Like, how is this not a movie that us, who generally considering we've got a fucking podcast about watching movies, we probably rank in the top of percentiles of the general population.
I am a genius, as we've discussed also.
Sam is a genius. There's a circle something going on here. But that is what shocked me. I was trying to basically after watching this, because this is a fantastic watch. It really is you're not wasting your time watching this movie. It really is a great cinematic experience. I was trying to think why isn't this a movie that's not talked about more in terms of being one of the best movies of that decade or of all time or whatever, in a way that contemporary movies, and again Goodfellas I'm referring to here, which shares the same director and one of the same top billed cast, and it's made a year later. How is this not a movie we are more aware of? And that was the only sort of solution I could come up with, was that it kind of lacks that longevity in any sort of likable characters in it.
I would disagree, and only because I think valid point you're making, Dave. But
Sam, just edit fart noises over all of this.
I don't think it lacks longevity. What I think it is genuinely is the mature content, i.e.,
that's
sexual assault and grooming. But then that's why I think it's glossed over that sort of stuff now, because the world's a most happy place and nothing like this ever happens to people.
But then look at Goodfellas. Which you know what it is. I think. Go on, Ross. Go on.
Good, yeah. Just to respond to that point, Goodfellas though, it's cool because it's mafia, it's gangsters. People want to
Yeah.
know more about that. Yeah, it's murder and it's
I
fraud
have a
and it's
better,
threats
I have
and
a
it's
better, I
I
have a better
think
Martin Scorsese and Robert De Niro comparison, and it's Taxi Driver. Like, that is a movie very like this movie in terms of like, it's very gritty, very murdery, very
yeah.
like, and De Niro's character in this is, I think, actually worse than his character in Taxi Driver in
Oh,
terms
yeah.
of like the morality, way worse.
because
And that movie is lauded as like one of the best movies ever made, and yet this isn't. And there is a reason for that. Like, do you know what I mean? I'm not saying that this.
well,
I'm
and
not
I
trying to
think
denigrate this movie.
yeah, I think the reason though is that this isn't particularly novel. This is not something new. This is following the same set, almost like you can feel the beats of this movie coming, and I think that it's very un-Scorsese in that way. You kind of know where we're going. There's going to be some ultimate standoff at the end. And that it's not that we're gonna have all of these different scenes which are going to take us to a place that we kind of know where we're going. And if you look at the reviews of this, a lot of the criticism is that it's almost like, why did we need a remake of that 1962 film, which was all right? And that's kind of the attitude, is because I don't know that this necessarily is bringing much new to the concept of what a thriller is, or even the concept of what a melodrama is. It's kind of like a pastiche.
Or how it played out. You are right.
Yeah, we know what's going to happen. We know that by the end, the bad guy's going to get defeated. We know all of these things are kind of like built into our storytelling, and yet it's, I think, the journey and the sequencing in the movie is what brings it along. If you're not into that, then what is there to add? And I think it's a fair point to say this is maybe just a bit like consumable. It's maybe too consumable. It's too popcorn. Maybe, and that's maybe why it's not remembered.
Sam. I think that's a good takeaway of this movie. Again, I challenge anyone to sit down and watch this and not be like caught up in the excellent cinematography and the great performances and the sound. The score to it is wonderful as well. The score's really, really good. But like you said, it's when you go around and you sort of digest, when you go away, so you digest the movie more. Like, that's maybe where this movie falls down, like you said, Sam, because it's not doing anything different with the genre. Like, obviously, like Scorsese's other films, which kind of reinvent various genres or are, the shining beacon of example of that genre. And this maybe isn't that for the sort of like melodrama, psychological thriller sort of movie.
Shall we get into the plot then? Shall we get into the kind of where this movie starts? And like, there's something really clever about, and again, you can think, well, is this just what happened in the 60s version? But let's just forget that for a second. There's something really clever about setting up your protagonist, the lawyer, played by
Nick Nolte.
Nick Nolte, yeah, who plays Sam Bowden. He's kind of, he's so flawed. We get to see his semi-affair. Is he having an affair? He's playing squash with someone.
There's a semi involved.
Ooh, he's playing squash.
God in heaven.
Yeah, demonetized.
Playing squash, you filthy-minded weirdos.
They're playing squash, but they're not. It's maybe an emotional affair. He's obviously, they had to move because of his previous dalliances with his wife and all this stuff.
Yes.
So we already get this really flawed character, and then we bring in. Eventually, we learn that he also buried evidence for one of his.
This is just the one time it's caught with him, by the way. Like, it's discussed like this. He's done this before. We should talk about the burying evidence though, in terms of like the actual legal thing. In that, the confusing thing is this isn't the guy who put Robert De Niro in prison. What's their character name, by the way, so we can use that? Is it Cady?
Cady, yeah.
Max Cady.
Yeah, Max Cady. So Nick Nolte wasn't the prosecutor. He didn't like send Max Cady down. He was the defense attorney. So he basically botched the defense because he thought he was guilty, which is so morally bankrupt. And the way that he botched it, I found absolutely. It's a 1991 thing where, like, the implication is this guy raped this woman allegedly, and the film kind of never definitively says whether he did it, although it kind of looks like he might have done it.
Maybe.
I'm going to go back on here. He did it.
Yeah, well, exactly.
But I'm not a lawyer.
Thank
so
you,
I can
Ross,
say
for
that.
being the guy guilty. Good. But like, essentially, the evidence that he buried was that like the girl he raped was promiscuous, and it's like thrown around, and De Niro believes it as well, and the judge and everyone he talks to is like, "Oh yeah, if you brought that evidence up, like he'd got off," and it's like, what?
Yeah. Well, but I mean,
But that's the
let's.
thing, Dave. That, like he would have, because like
Yeah.
a background report, and what's the verdict? Promiscuous. Do you know what I mean? The fact that it's either, well, obviously, she asked for it or she didn't. Do you know what I mean? Basically, that's what the report is saying. Promiscuous equals asking for it.
But it doesn't even say, and I guess it's the 90s, but like it doesn't even say like, oh, it was the 70s, like he would have got off based on that. They don't, and obviously I think if that was made now, it would be like, oh, it was the 80s, like that was just how things were back then, and
But
saying,
that still
isn't
happens
how
now.
it is now.
Women
Yeah.
still
It
ask
does.
what they were wearing and how much do they have to drink and who how many other sexual partners you have, as if that makes any fucking difference to whether or not somebody will potentially assault someone else. Like it doesn't. So but again, it is like we enter the moral soup of this movie where nobody's a good guy. Everyone is turned up to 11.
That's what I love about it.
They all
That's what I
crawled
genuinely
through a
love about
river
it.
of shit, and nobody came out clean on the other side.
No, they did not.
Thank you, Dave. So you see Nick Nolte's flaws. You see, like, even the wife's flaws. Obviously, she's a bit, she's got her own problems as well. But everyone in this movie is a real person. I mean, even like what I love is the movie doesn't shine lights on this is Nick Nolte. He's a complicated guy. He's done this. He's done that. No, it's like it's they reference things. Obviously, the thing where he buried the evidence to shine light on that because that's part of the movie. But the character's flaws, they reference to it, but they don't actively, for example, that scene where Nick Nolte and Jessica Lange were having their argument. There was no flashback
daughter.
scene there.
Uh-huh.
Jessica Lange's the wife.
Oh, sorry.
All
Sorry.
right. But I'm saying when they
Sam
were having
has
that,
The daughter. I'm just going to keep saying it until I get it right.
the daughter is called Juliette Lewis. Sam.
Right, I
There's
apologize.
this really cool website called IMDb. If you scroll down that page,
The daughter.
you
No.
see the cast list. But what I'm saying is when they have
Sam
that
thinks he's
argument,
stuck in a Taken movie.
Right.
move on.
Continue, Ross.
I think it's wasted this point. All I was saying is that they don't shine lights on the people's flaws, but they rather use that to don't you fucking say daughter. They use that to form the characters.
Yes. Yeah. No,
It's
you are
very,
right because
it's very light touch with the storytelling, and like you said, Ross, the character development is all. There's not a lot of exposition here. We don't ever get like this is who he's been released from prison. We see it. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, and it's where you see the as well. Like when I said that I watched 20 minutes of this, and I was like, who directed this? Because it's really competent. Like, it's really, really competent the way that they introduce everyone, and
it's
very
much
show don't tell.
Yes, thank you, Dave.
And is it not totally unrecognizable as a Scorsese film? Like we all know,
There's nary a gangster to be seen, Sam.
there's no gangsters in number one, but like Scorsese movies have
No Joe
like
Pesci.
this- No, yeah.
Where Joe Pesci would have improved this movie, but
He was an extra. I
much mad
swear
energy.
he was an extra somewhere at the back. But like Scorsese movies have this feel to them. We get your long shots, the single takes. We get these. We get the non-diegetic music that's overlaid on top of scenes. We get all of these things. We get the cinematography is very kind of quick and snappy, and we move around and we get to see stuff in a kind of weird way. It's very creative. Whereas this is much more conventional in the sense of we get to often it's just two cameras. The scene later on with the daughter and the rapist, who I can't even remember the actor's name at this point.
Robert De Niro.
Robert De Niro.
Good Lord, Sam.
I know, I'm tired.
Do you need another week off?
I do. I need several weeks off. That scene is literally the bit where they're having a conversation. It's two shots. It's him in a very standard framed, kind of he's on the right hand side. We get to see a little bit of the scenery behind him, and then it's her, and she's equally like it, and it just switches back and forth. There's nothing else until they go to the panning, the wider shot where she runs up the stairs. Like that's not a Scorsese. That doesn't feel like a Scorsese movie, because I think again, it's aping Hitchcock. It's aping of these other styles of movies that we've seen before. And it's kind of disconcerting. Like, it's slower. It's so much slower. So when you say, Dave, who directed this? I think most Scorsese films, you'd be able to figure that out pretty quickly, that this is a Scorsese movie. If you know cinema, as well as we do.
Genius!
Good Lord. It's catching. I was just going to say, though, do you not think that might be because, obviously, this is a remake of a 60s movie, and so a lot of it will be in the effort to stay true to the original, whilst trying to put your own, in the case of Martin Scorsese, your own Scorsese touch on it.
It's an impression. There's one shot that I noticed, and it's the bit where he's got the shutters, and he's at the shutters, and he's standing on the wall. De Niro's sitting on the wall, staring at them. From the house,
lying on the wall like a cat.
I know, it looks so weird. With the fucking fireworks.
Like one of your Robert De Niro's.
But with the fireworks behind him, I mean, fucking hell! Like, this movie is so saturated with color. To completely get sidetracked, the clouds that we get to see, and the storms. Yes. Like, what the fuck? I mean, this is absolutely crazy because it's like 60s filmmaking is what they're going for. But my point was, there's a shot where he's looking through the slats. Nick Nolte's looking through the slats, and he snaps them shut, and we get this equally snappy snap zoom that zooms in to see to his face as it happens. Like, and it's such a disconcerting shot. It doesn't, again, it's designed to make you feel uncomfortable, but it's all of these little things that I think
it's very
build
old
up.
School Hollywood. A lot of the cinematography is very like, and it is
in your face, because they're like, we have cameras
aping
now.
A style. It's aping the style from the original. I'd be interested to watch the film that this was adapted from.
Yeah, totally.
I'm not going to, obviously, but like, I'd be interested to, because I bet that it's not as similar to this as we think it should be. I think that, like, Scorsese's trying to ape a certain style here, and like an older sort of thing, which is why he's doing a remake, and it's a bit out of his wheelhouse because it's not a gangster movie or a boxing movie.
But goddamn, does he know what he's doing? Like, that's the thing,
you see the quality. Like, it's a really weird outing for Scorsese, where like everyone knows Scorsese is one of our greatest directors ever, and like that's fine. And even in 1991, they knew he was phenomenally good. Like, he had been a big name for a long time even then. And this is kind of like a weird outing where he got to make a quieter movie, like less of a splash, but maybe like showcase some of those skills he picked up along the way that we maybe don't see in some of his more stylized, more iconic movies, that are remembered for the fact that they're stylized and for the iconic moments, like, Goodfellas, for instance. Like, what you remember about that movie is like the peaks of the movie, whereas this is kind of like a nice workman-like, I'm going to go out and I'm going to make an Alfred Hitchcock movie. I know it's 1991 and he's not involved because he's dead, but I'm going to go out and I'm going to make it.
Interestingly, the cinematographer of this, Freddie Francis, he's British. He's English, so he comes from that Ealing Studios, in the 60s style. So he would have shot films that like this, and I think he had a bit of resurgence in the late 80s into the 90s before he died. This being one of his last films. So like, already we're seeing that they're actually going to the source of what these movies were like and using people who knew how to do it because they'd done it, 30 years ago when these films were made, which I think is like, fucking, it's just great. It's just great because it's not in the way. Like, I feel like the whole time you're just being carried along because the tension is so.
It does contribute to the movie as a whole. Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
It's really good. Let's talk about De Niro. Let's talk about just.
I thought we were talking about the plot.
No, fuck it.
We started talking about the plot, and then we went on to cinematography.
Nick Nolte, he's a bad guy because he did this, but he's also our protagonist. So we kind of. But whereas De Niro, I mean. From number one, costume. God damn, well done, the costume department.
I wanted to bring that up. God in heaven.
Go ahead.
It just captures the eye, doesn't it? Everything De Niro wears in this movie, it's not necessarily out of place, but it's very loud. very, very loud all the time. I mean, from the lavish cars to the big stogie cigars he smokes, and the Hawaiian shirts, like he's smoking a lead pipe.
I'm sorry, I'm coughing on the fucking giant cigar that's like 8 inches in fucking diameter. Like, my
came out
God.
of your TV. Yeah, but yeah, absolutely. The costume cigars. Don't, Dave.
Just keep moving on, Dave. Keep moving on, Ross. Where are you going?
I totally agree. Everything Robert De Niro was wearing in that movie, it was just, loud is the word I would say.
Even to the car that he drives, this Ford Mustang, this red Ford Mustang, which we get some fucking amazing shots of it, like from above, as it's.
Do you know why he stands out, and do you know why the costume department does such a good job? Is like, this movie understands this guy. Number one, doesn't give a fuck. He's not trying to hide. He's not trying to, blend in. Also, he's been in prison for 15 years. So, he's just driving cars and dressing and smoking like he was before he went to prison.
Yes.
Because he's got all the money in the world and he is not trying to hide. I don't think we should not mention the fact that Rob De Niro is more ripped than I've seen him in any other film he's ever done. Maybe
True.
Raging Bull. But
which took him 5 hours a day. What he had to work out to maintain this. His tattoos, they're done with vegetable starch, which means they only last a few months. They had to be redone up to 10 times their previous size because he started off looking a bit like me, weedy, Robert De Niro from Taxi Driver.
Disclaimer, Sam has never looked anything like Robert De Niro, and we reject strenuously any sort of comparison between
No, keeping that, Sam. For those of you who want to watch on YouTube, those of you who just wanted to watch on YouTube, Sam just flexed, and I think, Sam, give the people what they want. Show us the gun show,
Absolutely. So he started off, and then they had to redo the tattoos because his body had changed so substantially. Yeah. Like, that's amazing.
Again, like we talk about this quite a lot with, obviously we do a lot of like muscly men films, sure, but this isn't that. But this is like a commitment to the bit from Robert De Niro, especially as like nowadays he's an old man actor. So seeing him in this like physical performance where I was reading something, he had less than 3% body fat. Yeah. And you can fucking see it in this first scene where he's doing pull-ups in the jail cell, and you're like, "Fuck me, is that a body double?" And it isn't. It's just like,
no, it's not The Irishman.
I was literally going to talk about The Irishman, Sam. Sorry to cut you off, but like when you compare, like Dave said, he's physically fit and able, and you compare that with The Irishman when they did that de-aging thing, which is garbage.
He can barely walk. He can barely walk because he's 95 years old.
But hang on, let me get my point across. And there was one scene where he's de-aged, and the scene is where he throws someone out of a shop. He starts kicking the shit of him, but he's not even able to kick properly.
He can't lift his arms, Ross.
He can't, and like, we're not denigrating the guy because he's aged, but obviously, like, just cast younger people. If you want someone to have a physical presence.
We're all aging, and in 30 years, when we're still on our own podcast, still with absolutely no listenership whatsoever, we will be looking just like them.
We'll get de-aged.
No, we won't, because we won't be that age until 45 years from now. Just to stress how old the cast.
No, but we're not as rich. We're not as rich as them. So our age is we're straight down the tubes.
Not yet, Sam. But I just want to say, in 45 years' time, my de-aging process, I'll have long flowing locks.
Science has not. We'll
never
go
so
that.
Far, right?
Can I talk? You want to talk about commitment? You want to talk about commitment to a role? You've read Wikipedia, but De Niro had his teeth ground down. He paid $5,000 of his own money to have his teeth ground down to make him look more menacing, and then paid a further $20,000 to fix it. I wanted to know, how do you fix fucking grinding down your teeth?
I kind of just assumed that everyone in Hollywood has veneers like all of the time. Like I just presume that Jerry Bruckheimer is going around like doing forcible injection surgery on everyone in Hollywood, so they've all got like big cheesy American veneers. So it doesn't matter because they weren't his real teeth anyway.
He spent 20 years training to be a dentist. That's what he did with all his Pirates of the Caribbean money.
Disclaimer: I don't think it takes 20 years to train to be a dentist, but
it does if you want to be the best dentist in Hollywood.
If you want to specialize in veneers.
Yeah.
God damn it.
We shouldn't, by the way, we should also mention Nick Nolte, who is looking quite like Gaunt in this movie, if you've seen Nick Nolte in other stuff around this time. And there's an interesting thing there where they were worried that Robert De Niro and Nick Nolte, like, out of the two, Nick Nolte's the bruiser. He's the big guy, you know, as an actor. He's bigger and heavier built than Robert De Niro generally. So they kind of like, Robert De Niro had to do 5 hours of working out a day to be in the best shape of his life. And Nick Nolte, they were like, you know, just eat a few cheeseburgers, you know, just take it easy.
Fucking great. Oh, where's that's the job I want. That's fantastic.
To make it so that De Niro is more physically threatening in this movie. And I do think they achieve that.
In terms of threat, though, I think that what we get from De Niro's character, and there's a lot of bits about the performance and a lot of it's about the writing, is like he's unstoppable. And you talked a little bit about like thriller and horror and where this sits on the. And I think what drags us into the kind of horror realm is that, you know, Max Cady cannot be stopped. He can't be stopped physically. We see that when he gets attempted, you know, those 3 idiots try and beat him up and they fail. We obviously see that later on with the hot water. It doesn't seem to faze him, and setting on fire, he comes back, and like we never. But also, like intellectually, and he shouts this. He says, "I will out-philosophize you. I will outthink you." Because he's not just physically imposing. He's like administratively imposing as well, because he's fucking smart. He's smart, and he's learned, and he's managed to like overcome all the shit that turned him into the psychopath he is.
He spent 14 years like obsessing about Nick Nolte and like obsessing about how this guy ruined his life, and that for 14 years that has been this guy's life, whereas Nick Nolte has fucking not thought about this guy since he went to prison. And like therein lies the difference. I think that, like, you know, the Max Cady character, and he is clever, and he doesn't just want to like you know, he doesn't just want to beat him, he wants to fucking destroy him and salt the earth, and like there's a way he goes about that, you know.
And then at the end of the movie, when he's, you know, Nick Nolte's holding the rock, he's got this massive rock and he tries to slam it down, and he just about manages to get there where he gets pulled out with a current, and we see him singing that fucking hymn and then speaking tongues. And like the first thing I thought was, he's still alive. Like, you haven't killed him. You can't kill him because he's unstoppable. He's unstoppable, and it's like you would still spend your entire life thinking he's still gonna turn up. He could have got out of it somehow, because this guy cannot be stopped. You know, and that is fucking terrifying. That's the fear. That's where the terror in this movie comes from, I think.
And the movie even sort of like hints at that near the end as well, because again, we never talked about it again because we don't want him basically in our dreams or some stuff she was saying. And she, and like, this is the daughter I'm talking about, and she even says, like, you know, then, you know, but you know, that's fear, isn't it? And like, it ends, the way it ends, like, it goes to that flash of red. And you're like, what is being said now? I said to you guys, like, that ending sort of voiceover is needless, but like, because to me, like, when he's dead, okay, now we've ended this story now, book is closed. But then her, you know, having her sort of monologue at the end, it suggests that there's something, you know, still to be dealt with.
Mm-hmm. I think that's the one bit of the movie that's a bit heavy-handed. I agree that I don't really like the voiceover at the end, because like I think you could have implied that, like, but is he dead? Is he dead? Like, you could have done that without the voiceover, which just kind of like feels disingenuous to the rest of the movie, where we don't have a voiceover from this character. And she doesn't,
we get it at the start,
like,
don't we? So it kind of bookends it.
A little,
but I think it's
for me. I don't think it's the one part of the movie that kind of like leaves you being like, "Is this The Ring?" Like, you need to pick one. Like, you can't be this thriller with the unkillable guy, and then also be The Ring, but only for the last 5 seconds.
It's back to that. It's back to that type of movie, though, isn't it? Which are very, you know, a bit more of a favorite. Here we go back to Hitchcock, but favorite scene in a Hitchcock movie is I think it's the end of Vertigo, when they're on a train carriage, the two main characters, and because they couldn't show sex in movies, Hitchcock shot a train going through a tunnel.
My man Hitchcock, he knew how to get it done.
Yes. But
You
it's that
dirty
type.
dog.
I think it's that.
Oh yeah, trains. Oh yeah, look at that civil engineering. We all did the same face.
Welcome.
We know.
It's that type of like, it's a bit more overt, it's a bit more tongue in cheek. Again, it's more over exaggerating. It kind of, I mean, we do end the film with a negative shot of, you know, the girl's eyes, and it's all kind of a bit like. But I think it kind of, I like it. It's nostalgic. It's fun, and the over egging, I think, is part of the kind of DNA of this movie, because all the way through, none of it's particularly realistic, you know, and this is, and Max Cady's character is a perfect example of a character who just doesn't defy the normal rules of physics, you know, and that therein, as we said, is the fear.
I would maybe argue with you about it not being realistic, Sam, just on a small point of, I think it's remarkably reserved for a lot of this movie. This is not a, you know, Christian Bale fucking bodies dropping left, right, and center sort of movie. This is a, as far as I know, I was really surprised he didn't kill the woman that Nick Nolte was having an affair with. I was really shocked when she did not turn up dead. Like, really surprised. You know, he doesn't kill her. He could have killed the daughter, and he doesn't. Again, like, the only people who get killed are unnamed Mexican help, so that he can steal her clothes. And then he throttles the private detective, and and obviously Max Cady himself. But like, those are the only two people that he kills directly, and it's kind of like actually in a movie that's this frightening, and I do mean that. Really, this movie is frightening. It's very well constructed, and like, it's designed to make your heart go, "Oh fuck, who's going to die here?" I think it really, really like does that very well, where it doesn't just start murdering people.
That's why I'm going to sit on the fence, and like, I actually agree with both of you, Dave. I think it is reserved, and you, Sam, because when you say it's melodramatic, reserved because of the reasons you say, Dave. Melodramatic because, you know, some of the scenes with Jessica Lange, who plays Lee Bowden, you know, like she gives off a vibe like she belongs on a, you know, like an American soap opera. The way some of her characters,
she's lighting cigarettes off the last cigarette for the whole movie.
Yeah. Like I'm surprised she didn't have a cigarillo, you know. But
like a 1950s starlet. Do you know what I mean?
Yes,
that's
I don't think she was hamming it up, though, mind you. Like, you know, everything. Her performance was stellar. But, you know, when you said melodramatic, Sam, I thought of Jessica Lange. Yeah, and just
she takes a drag from a cigarette and flings her head back, you know, like, and you see the smoke rising, and the whole thing is just like we know the imagery. We know the imagery of these characters, don't we? We've seen it before, and it's like it's mining all of these things to make us feel like a particular way, you know.
And again, it's reserved, like Dave said, because it elicits that, you know, that feeling of being tense from you. Like when I was watching last night, Dave, I think you were like literally 5 minutes ahead of me in the movie.
I don't even think I was that, Ross. I think it was like a minute, just by chance. We just started watching it at the exact same time.
Coincidence. We were watching because we should talk about some scenes, by the way, before we wrap up. Not that we're wrapping up, but there were some scenes.
2 hours later.
Yeah. See you guys. But, you know, because obviously it was after the scene with the law clerk, you know, where she was assaulted, and then we were watching, and then Sam, you texted saying, "Oh, the scene with Katie and the daughter. Oof, I'm heartbroken." I'm like, "No, Sam, don't tell me that." I honestly thought, you know, that she was going to get assaulted. I mean, she was assaulted in a way, but, you know, not to a same degree that the law clerk was. And I was watching that scene, and honestly, I was waiting for. I was like, when's he going to lunge? Do you know what I mean? When's it going to strike? And I was on tender hooks. Do you know what I mean? Watching that. I mean, I probably would have anyway without your text, Sam. Like, thinking, because I know what this character is capable of. But the relief when that scene was over. Oh.
In that same way, I'm going to build up the tension before we get to discuss that bit, because I think that is probably, for me, it's probably the highlight of the film. But let's hold on. Are we going to do some of the same?
Are we going to do some of the same camera angles, like right up to the camera, tilt it like it was in the boat, like 180?
Yeah, that's it. The thing I just want to talk about before we get to is, like, I love the tension that they managed to develop in this. By the fact that basically nobody can help them. Like the helplessness of this movie is brilliant because, and they even point it out. They even say it. Like the law's great. If you want to, if you want to deal with general things, if you want to stop speeding, then we can do something about that. If you want to stop a particular, you can't stop someone sitting on your wall, and staring at you because really there's no crime that's been committed. And yes, this guy is specifically targeted. And me and Nicola were watching it, and we were like, if someone tried to do that to us, what the fuck would you do? Because they haven't. If someone just stood outside your house every single day, just stood there on the road on a piece of public property, and just stood there and stared at you, what would you do? You could shout at them.
It feels very intentional. Like he knows exactly what he can do, and they can't get a restraining order. They can't call the police. There is a bit of a line here where the guy says, "Oh well, he's just come out of prison. He'll be poor as fuck. So we'll pick him up. We'll book him for vagrancy." Which is a great law in America where it's illegal to be poor. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, it's illegal to be poor.
That's one of the scenes I was saying. That's one of the things I was saying where it shines a light on basically, an American judicial system. Sure, I mean maybe the UK system as well, maybe to an extent.
I'm not sure we have vagrancy laws in the same way, but certainly in America,
maybe not in the same way. But I mean in the UK, it's illegal to beg. Do you know what I mean? If you're outside a certain area, you'll be told to move on. To where? I don't live anywhere. Anyway, this isn't the podcast for that.
We'll fix homelessness next week, Ross. But yeah, they say if he's a vagrant, we can pick him up for that, and they can't because he's got loads of money. And that kind of then leads to for Nick Nolte is kind of like then the next step of how to deal with that is like, right, if you can't go to the police, you go to the mob. No, you basically hire this private detective.
We get the guy out of Goldeneye, the American guy out of Goldeneye, who's where I was like, oh look, it's him. I think his name's Jack. So yeah, this guy's a fucking idiot,
Joe Don Baker, by the way.
He's an idiot.
I think he is peak like man in his 50s in a suit who looks slightly disreputable.
Well, and
like,
they also
this is his niche.
What's his name? Kazak?
Claude Kursick.
Kursick.
You've been told twice on this episode, Sam.
Yeah.
Told twice more.
So Kojak, he says...
BoJack Horseman, got you.
He Lee says, did you find out how he lost his job with the Force? Like, they make reference all the time about this guy who's lost... Because basically, they entrust their safety to this fucking guy who's setting up teddy bears with string, like this is, and again the helplessness, the positions of authority that they try and like get their savior in, all just fucking are useless. The law's useless.
This movie could pivot though, and be then a movie about how this family is all put in prison because their plan, after the police can't help them, their plan is to entrap this man to break into the house because he's basically like, once he's in your house, you can do what you like with him. The Simpsons, in fact, it's a scene in the Simpsons episode where Chief Wiggum says, once he's in your house, whatever you do to him is nice and legal. And like,
and he invites Flanders over.
Because in this movie, exactly, he's like, if he breaks into your house, you can fucking kill him, and it's all fine, it's all no problem. And you're like, okay, America, what?
Why did they make a parody of this movie, The Simpsons? I'm still confused.
Wiggum, I even used like a teddy bear himself. And like to set up a trap, it was unreal.
What
I was going to say is though, like what a good example of what when you were saying melodramatic, Sam, is because when finally obviously he's groomed the daughter in a way, and basically Nick Nolte as the dad has had enough, and he essentially gives Kursick, who's sort of handling his protection, gives him the green light to hire these goons, and then Nick Nolte goes to warn De Niro, Max Cady, and I just think for me that was a red flag for me for this movie, because as a lawyer, you would not do anything. You would not be speaking to this guy. You would not even warn him. Try and get him out of town.
Could you repeat that?
Yeah. Could you?
Should be a thing of like fucking no, I will not.
Yeah. I just think as well. I was just thinking of, It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia, where Charlie is being Serpico, and he's got like a microphone that isn't at all well hidden. Bingo!
There's also several Simpsons episodes where Homer has a poorly hidden microphone like sat on his belly. But yeah, like
Or the hat.
and it's-
Remember the giant hat?
the hat he can barely walk under because it weighs.
Could you?
Anyway, this
This
is
is
the
a
Simpsons
Simpson.
podcast.
Your hat is making several noises. Yeah.
Could you repeat that? No, I don't think I will. I think you heard me.
No.
I'm going to leave.
You heard me.
Yeah,
You heard me.
It's-
In fact,
it's a weird one.
I
but
learned
it's
sign
like-
language. Just so you're clear, we can do this. We can do this.
We should have mob rules. All meetings should take place in saunas. You know, let's go for a schwitz. And that's where we meet, because then you're not wearing a wire. But that scene where they get the guys to beat him up, Ross, I do want to talk about that a little bit, because like, get better guys. Like, if you are armed with bats and chains and stuff and you can't beat the shit out of one guy and there are three of you, obviously this is your first night on the beating people up for money job.
Again, but I agree with Dave, and bit of pedantic cast here, but there's a bit where Robert De Niro has dropped to his knees, and then they're laying the pipe like on his body, on his back. Like, if you want to teach this guy a lesson, you're going to be cracking his skull. Do you know what I mean? You're not going to be hitting the meaty parts. I'm going to bring it down on his head.
But this guy.
That's just me. That's just me.
This
if I'd
guy's
been paid to assault a guy, I'd hit
Please
him
see
on the
Ross
head.
for all
At
your
this
hitman
point-
needs. I think that's what
At
he's
this
saying.
point in America, just fucking buy a gun, Nick Nolte. Like,
Listen,
go down an alleyway,
listen.
shoot him.
Wow.
Oh, he came at me with a gun. He came at me with a knife.
This guy.
Property of Nick Nolte. Oh no, that he must have stolen that from me previously.
This guy has been in prison for 14 years, and he's had a very, very horrible time in there in terms
Well, he
of
killed
being
someone in prison,
assaulted,
we find out later.
being raped,
he's-
all these other things. So this guy knows how to fucking handle himself, because he's had to do so. He's had to be tough. So when three guys come at him, like,
He's like,
three-
Tuesdays.
yeah, exactly. He knows what to do. This is just his regular morning wake up. Like, he's fine. So I think it perfectly read for me as like this. Yeah, this is what happened, because this and again, because of the rules of the movie this guy is unstoppable. So three guys with a fucking baseball bat are not going to touch him. They're not going to be able to make any dent on this. His pursuit. And then when Nick Nolte's there. And he's God Almighty.
Fucking, if you consult the having someone beaten up rule book, don't
go
fucking
there.
be there
Why- yeah,
as
why
an
are you there?
accomplice.
You're a lawyer. You're a lawyer. What are you doing there? Number one. Oh no, the restraining order hadn't been.
You
put
sit in a
yet.
home, or better yet, in a crowded restaurant where loads of people can see you because you do not want to be tied to this.
Hello, police. Hello, this is lawyer guy. Just want to let you know I'm outside your station.
Yeah.
Why?
Just having a
reason.
sandwich.
Just remember this. Take a note of this. Write down the time. Okay. Thank you. Bye bye.
Yeah. But I think we should segue at this point into the other side of the Jack Nicholson character here, where he isn't the psychopath murdering machine. And for that point, we're going to talk about. I want to talk certainly about two scenes. So there's a scene in the theater with the daughter.
Just straight in
But
there.
maybe
No-
let's talk
no
about the other
preamble at
scene
all.
where he gets to turn on the charm a little bit. The scene where he goes to the airport to find out where Nick Nolte is.
That's
Oh,
it,
yeah.
Dave. That's it. Keep building that tension. To get to the point where we
Exactly.
talk about the third scene. This bit I think is great, and it's like where you get to really understand how clever they think they are in terms of going to the airport and getting on the plane and then running off the plane, or however they manage to do it. But also that real like psychopath element, because he's not only a crazy person who's
I
pursuing.
think maybe Sam, sorry, sociopath is perhaps a better
Yes, I think you're
term,
right. Actually,
because like he isn't just going in there shaking this woman behind the counter and telling her to tell her the information. He manipulates her very cleverly.
he's emotionally
by being
fluid, isn't he?
Nice, exactly.
He knows the rules and he knows how to do it. And he says, "Oh, our daughter got killed, and I just need to know when he's back." And if there's any way you could do that, that would be just amazing. Like, he just lays it on thick, and this poor woman, is just trying to be nice. It's just trying to be nice to this guy who's obviously, because Max has been beaten to shit by these guys. He looks like, but even we get to see the same manipulation when we get to see Gregory Peck for some fucking reason. I mean, Gregory Peck, who was in the original, the judge was in the original, and the police chief was in the original as well, all in slightly different roles. But we get to see these guys, and Gregory Peck doing his thing, in terms of like, yeah, he can play a lawyer. He's been
who's
in a
Gregory Peck, but yeah, okay.
He's been in a small film where he played a lawyer. I don't know if you've heard of it, but there's like that bit's all. He's obviously laid it on thick to Gregory Peck's character to say, I mean, I just don't understand why Nick Nolte keeps assaulting me and just he's just attacking my character and I'm trying to get on the straight and narrow after so many years. Like there's all these things and that it goes to the core of just how fucking terrifying this guy is.
I didn't take that as him laying it on thick to the lawyer because I think once he had retained his services.
Well, you just like lawyers are scumbags.
You know what I mean? Lawyers like, oh, this guy's paid me, and if I win, I get money. Sweet.
We haven't mentioned, by the way, isn't this lawyer Nick Nolte's lawyer initially?
Well, he says
Nick Nolte rings him to be like, "You've got to help me with this guy." And he's like, "Oh, I'm sorry, Max Cady. I'm gonna have to end this conversation there because he's given me a big bag full of money."
Yeah. Literally that morning. So because Nick Nolte had been given his details like 4 or 5 days prior, but he kept putting off calling him. And when he finally got around to calling him, the day of he called him, that very morning, Max Cady had retained him. So he couldn't. Do you know what I mean? It was a conflict.
It's like in a movie
interest.
where someone's trying to get divorced and the husband goes to every divorce lawyer in town and pays them so that the wife can't find a divorce lawyer. It's that kind of thing. It's clever.
You mean Sopranos?
Yeah. It might be one of those things.
Well, maybe more stuff than that, Ross. I'm sure I've seen it twice.
It might be one of those things that you end up thinking, oh, well, how did you know? Like, but I think again in the rules of the movie, perfectly acceptable, works for me. Adds a great layer. Adds a great layer. And it really goes.
The implication is that Max Cady is clever enough that he's been in their house. Like he didn't just show up one day at the cinema and like start smoking and be like, "Oh, hey, it's that guy who put me in prison." Like he has been planning this for years.
He's clever enough to know who the best lawyer is because he's basically studied law. That learned to read and then studied law, which is a bit of a jump. But like all of these things make sense because this guy is single-minded. Yeah, wow. He's single-minded in his pursuit, though. If someone's well motivated enough, then they will be able to do what they want, and that's what he manages to do really well. I think So it works for me. It works.
So let's talk about this theatre scene because we've been dancing around it.
Well, let's go production first.
Podcast.
Let's go production first. So they had 3 goes at this. The shot, the scene that we see is the first take, and I think what's so terrifying about this is just how real it feels. Now I think De Niro's doing a great job here. I think he's menacing. I think he's
at playing a rapist.
I think he's menacing. He's menacing in how.
No, Ross. Sam's like, yeah, this is some really, really grade A.
Sam's there with the pen.
Predatoring.
He's like, easy, guys.
Oh right, I see.
Easy.
See. Offer them drugs. Oh, this is genius.
So pretend to be their teacher. Oh, okay.
Fuck's sake, it's getting cut. So all of this is really good, right? It's really good because you get the foundations laid by De Niro in the phone call the night before, and then he builds up. But there's the reveal. Where she figures out that you're not my teacher, are you? You're fucking Max Cady. You're the guy who's been. And
you killed our dog.
And what's so terrifying is that because she's an innocent girl. She's a child whose brain is literally not functioning. Is not able to function in that way.
Yeah.
Yep. She's like, okay, but I'm not going to be terrified straight away. So I think he's doing a great job. But this performance from Juliette Lewis is like one of those things that I don't think I've seen in maybe all the movies that we've watched so far a single scene and a single performance as good as this. I think this is absolutely stunning because she's.
You know what I think it is, Sam? I think the fear is real. Like,
this
this girl was 17 years old when they filmed this movie, 16 or 17. Robert De Niro is I think probably quite an intimidating figure. When he's just being Robert De Niro, like especially in this movie, in this scene, playing this character, saying the things that he's saying, like I can believe, a young girl would be like, "Oh, this is fucking terrifying," but at the
The
same
thumb
time,
in the
like,
mouth. The thumb in the mouth. And this, so we get one attempt. And again, this is the first time they've ever done this. And the important fact is that most of it was improv. Most of it, they had a rough idea of where they were going, but basically it's improv. And so there's a bit where he kind of puts his thumb near her mouth, and then there's the next time he kind of puts it in a little bit more, and then he manages to, he puts it all the way in her mouth, and she kind of sucks his thumb a little bit, and it is, that is a scene my stomach turned. It is just revolting.
It's horrible.
It's revolting. Hold on. 2 seconds. So that is I think that response is real. I think he's doing it to almost say to the actor, to say to Juliette Lewis, "Are you ready for this? Like, this is what I'm going to do." And he does it a couple of times to kind of like, and then she, because she's a fucking amazing actress, she responds, figures out what De Niro's doing, and says, "Okay." And I think that journey that we get to see the two actors going on is the same thing that the characters are doing, because they're both so fucking, they're both figuring out what's happening, and to capture that on screen, fuck in hell, like this scene is terrifying because it is, as you say, Dave, so real. Well,
the important point I think about this scene to mention in terms of the wider movie, I'm just trying to phrase this so I don't sound like a pervert.
Don't say that.
Already failed. No, what I mean is that in terms of the movie, the thematic points of this movie, this is the seduction scene. I know that sounds bizarre, but this is the movie where Robert De Niro is trying to seduce this girl. Like, obviously, Ross, you said about it's there's a very gloomy sort of way to it. Like, that's absolutely intentional. It absolutely is to be again, he's doing these things to take away from Nick Nolte. Not necessarily, I think, because he really wants to, groom this girl. I think it's he recognizes that's the one thing he can do that will utterly destroy Nick Nolte, and he then pursues it with that single-mindedness. I do think the scene does it very well, where he is just not smooth enough. He is just not clever enough to get away with it, and it's very good. And again, the performance from the actress playing the daughter as well, is phenomenal. Juliette Lewis. And
that's a thread. That's a thread that we see throughout the whole film. Is it towards the end? Because when they're on the houseboat, she kind of leans into it and says, "Oh, I knew you'd follow me," and I remember I memorized a certain
some of the book,
and it's fucking awful. God, it's awful because you see, and it's great. It's great because she's slightly out of frame, so you only see kind of half her face, but you see the mother, the dread that she feels to realize that her daughter has been groomed by this man, by this disgusting man. And then the kind of the turn is actually, no, I was saying that to lull you in a false insecurity. Here, have some boiling water, which doesn't work, but it's a good effort. But
something, Sam.
So we see that thread from her being seduced, being groomed with the phone call, with the theatre scene. Yes, she runs off, but she's still, we get the book later, which she hides.
But she is infatuated with him. By that point. The connection's there. And in my opinion, obviously, it's a very obvious one. But I think what sort of broke, without a better vernacular on my end, but what broke the spell was obviously when he killed those two people, because then she realizes the extent of the danger they're in. There's two bodies
the
lying
PI
on
and the maid,
and the maid.
By the way, that's a really unintentionally hilarious shot when he kills the PI
when he slips in the blood.
No. Not when they find the body. So when he kills him, basically he's killed the maid off screen and put on her dress and wig, and so when he strangles the PI. He's wearing this floral sort of maid's dress and this
a night
curly
gown.
black wig. I don't know, and it's just there's something about it where you sort of just for a second the veil slipped and I was like, what the fuck is Robert De Niro wearing? Just because the movie does, like I said, it's not telling you things, it's showing you things. So
it's melodrama.
All of this is inferred,
it's exaggerated,
and but just for a moment it broke the spell of the movie and I was like, this is hilarious. What is he wearing here?
Yeah, yeah, and it's kind of intentional in that way, isn't it?
Yeah,
It's
to
so
jar.
ludicrous. It's so ludicrous, and that's where it's scary, you know. But this theatre scene, honestly, I really don't think I've seen a better performance than Julia, because she sells being this incredibly vulnerable. You know, you can see like the change in her from being like she's a bit worried, but she also loves the attention, and he says all the right things. You know, your parents, they don't understand you. They
Yeah.
punish you for doing things that they do. They're the ones who are fucked up. They're the ones who are
All these
arguing.
things you're feeling are natural. You want to lean into them. Yeah.
And actually, and I think that De Niro, you know, studied and kind of researched a lot of sex offenders and rapists, and I think that you really see. For me, it was a real eye opener of like, this is how these fuckers work. Is that
Yeah.
they lean on the insecurity, they lean on the
Well, it's predatory. It's predatory, like you said,
Yeah.
Sam. Their brains are not, and I don't mean this in a condescending way, but like a child's brain, and that's what they are. Children, they're not fully developed, so they lean on that and they take advantage of that, and by gaining their confidence, and connecting to them on certain aspects that they understand, like going through puberty and the emotions they're going through. Your parents don't understand you, but I do. That sort of thing. Like, yeah, I agree with you.
That
De
is
Niro.
why it's scary as fuck.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And that kind of like the whole movie hangs on that as well. Is that
it could happen to
that
you.
this guy is scary,
Yeah.
and he's scary because of what the things he's doing, but also the way that he's doing it, and also the fact that there's nothing they can do to stop him. Like,
Well, you even
and that
see
ultimately,
you even see in a later scene, like before, obviously, the maid and the PI is killed, but Nick Nolte is going around the house, closing the shutters again, and he speaks to the daughter. This is after, obviously, the scene in the theater, and he says, I'll put on some clothes. You're not a kid anymore. And then they mention Max Cady, and I can't remember the conversation, but she begins to smile when they're talking about her, and she was like, he didn't goad me into it, or he didn't take advantage of me, like, we have a connection. And he's like, and she's smiling, he's like, and he shakes her, he's like, do you know what you're saying? What did he do to you?
Get that smile off your face.
Yeah.
terrifying.
Which is like that is the natural response, because she is a child and she's dealing with it. She's obviously internalized it in a way, in the way
Romanticized
that, if you tell off a kid, often they will sit and smile at you. Not because they think it's particularly funny, because it's like, this is a coping mechanism. I'm gonna oh, this is a bit of a laugh. And sometimes you have having that conversation, right? No, enough. This is not funny. This is the consequences of what. Whereas she does not get it. At that point, she does not get it, and I think it takes time for her to really understand. And her arc, as we get to the end of the movie, as we've said, is her figuring out.
It's well earned. It's well earned.
Now he's tied up my dad, and is in the
Maybe my
Right,
parents
mother,
were
yeah.
onto something.
It's all become very real all of a sudden, and he murdered those two people earlier, but it's become very, very real. And they're on a boat.
That's
Never
good.
get on a boat when you're being chased by a murderer. Like,
I know,
seriously,
yeah.
guys.
I know.
Fucking rule number one:
Go to
Max?
a crowded hotel, and that's how you do it.
busy
But I-
restaurant, lots of witnesses.
I think that, like, you nailed it, Dave. This is the fear. This is the fear in the movie, is that we get to see a slice of reality that's so close, and it is like, literally, you feel sick watching that scene. You feel sick because of, and again, there's two shots. There's primarily two shots in this scene. It's just her and him. They just switch back. A B A B A B. That's it. And it's all about the performance, and that is absolute. That's just genius. That's genius filmmaking.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I agree.
God damn it! We're kind of like. So maybe we skip ahead a bit, because there's lots of stuff that happens. We lose the dog. The dog dies.
We're still on the
I think you're
fucking
going
plot.
back.
What?
We have already talked
we
about
have
the beginning,
jumped-
the middle, and the end of this
Yeah,
movie.
we have
Sam.
jumped
Yeah, no, but
through
what-
this movie.
Okay, but what I want to talk about is we've got this kind of middle bit. We've got the start of the movie where he's trying to reason with him. He's trying to kind of deal with things in his own in the way that you would conventionally. Then things start to get a little bit more suspect in the middle. We get the beaten up scene. We get the dog scene. The last act of the movie, the last 20 minutes or so, is the bit that I think It's the bit that I can maybe have more of a problem with, in terms of if everything is so exaggerated at this point. Like, we are in proper horror movie levels. If this guy had a hockey mask on and a machete, it would not feel out of place in terms of how it's shot, the kind of the craziness of it all. They're on a houseboat, there's a storm, like we see the boat get splintered and destroyed, and all of this stuff ends up being really, really dramatic, like super dramatic. It's just a bit ridiculous. And I can kind of see, if you were watching this not really bought into the whole thing, you'd be like, oh, for fuck's sake, this is where we get the silliness. This is where we get the monologues and all of the other kind of stuff. But for me, fucking terrifying. When he's got the gun and he's basically telling them to take their clothes off. Like, fucking hell, that is, again, it's just so scary. It's so scary because they're so helpless. Like, and that's
it's the culmination of, like you said, Sam, it's the culmination of all these different like threads of why this guy's intimidating kind of coming to the fore. And actually, I would say that like there is this outpouring of tension. It is scary. I would say that's actually one of the less tense scenes in the movie, like the very ending, because like the build up is so good, but it's, what do we call it? Like the invariable end of this has to be like, we have to throw down the bad guy and he has to be defeated. But it all just seems somewhat perfunctory. Do you know what I mean? Like, oh, is Nick Nolte dead? Is he dead? No, he's not dead.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I mean, with the ending, like, I think it's, I don't think it's too sort of melodramatic, because we know now this guy's a fucking psychopath, and he's gone through some damage now, with the flare and the hot water, and he's been set on fire. So when that scene where he has all these monologues and he pretends to be a lawyer speaking to a judge that isn't there, I love all that. When he starts speaking in tongues at the end, when he's handcuffed to the railing and he's drowning and he's singing Bible hymns. Yeah, I just love it. It all feels right. It all feels earned to me that this guy's mind is just unraveling now.
Oh, the very, very end, I totally agree, Ross. What I mean is that kind of like, what's the word? That between when he knocks out Nick Nolte and ties him up, and like maybe when the boat starts to fall apart, like, not a dead space, but I just think it may be like, it's where the movie, there's no tension building up anymore. It's kind of like we'll build this big outpouring of it, and then after the boat starts to break up again, the tension starts to ramp up again, and that's kind of like, this movie's always better when it's on that upslope, whereas that is at one point in the movie where we kind of bottom out a little bit, and
yeah, that's fair.
Yeah,
I'm not saying it's that makes it any worse to watch. I just kind of want to mention it in terms of like the way the movie dips and falls.
Well, it's because we know the direction of travel, don't we? Like, we know where, because the film's kind of told us, and we kind of know how this type of movie ends. We know that the bad guy isn't going to get away with it, So when he's monologuing, when he's shouting, and again we get to see Danielle like figuring things out, and she becomes she develops an agency which she didn't have before, because she's like, right, I'm going to get this lighter fluid, I'm going to hide it, and I'm going to wait, because he knows that the cigar thing, all of these things are kind of like building to a point, and the audience knows but the characters don't. So it's kind of inevitable, isn't it, that what happens? It's just whether or not are they going to survive it, or are they going to have to live with something horrible that happens to them? All these unknown questions, but we know he's going to die. We know because he's the baddie, or we know he's going to at least get vanquished, if not.
We know he's going to sing the entire HMS Pinafore and then be arrested when the boat presses a brothel.
Take him away, toys!
Oh, you bastards! I'm literally about to come out of my mouth. That.
So you take him in a robe.
You guys talked about all the the cinematography, the camera angles, camera shots. One thing that stood to me in a somewhat negative way is some of the camera movements in the boat scene. Where they're in the rough waters and they're hitting rocks underneath, and the camera revolves on the horizontal axis by like a 180. And I was like, to me, that suggests to me that the boat has flipped, but it's still the right way up. And I was having trouble trying to discern what they were trying to get me to think here.
This is absolute classic Hitchcock. It honestly is, because like the this type of film, because they couldn't do the obviously the visual effects that we have now. So it was much more physical. So if you wanted to show movement and discordant, you just move the camera. Like I think it's very intentional. I do think it doesn't quite work. Like there's bits where
I do see what you mean, but it's someone. This movie does do it otherwise as well. Like we're in a conversation, the camera's a person. I know it sounds daft, but like there's a conversation happening between 2 or 3 people. The camera's sat next to them. It's not in the corner of the room looking at them. It's in there. It's in. Do you know what I mean? It's in the group. We're sat watching KD and the daughter have a conversation. The camera's with them. It's not like off in the distance. And it's the same on the boat. The camera's a person. The boat pitches. The camera falls over. Like it sounds daft, but it's a style of filmmaking that I agree on the boat. It doesn't quite work. I think it's just a bit.
I don't mind if if the camera, because that does make sense to me, Dave. And when the boat is shaking, I wouldn't mind the camera shaking to mimic that, as if you were a person. But it just a straight 180, twist.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? As if it's on a gimbal. Do you know what I mean? Just and so
that's literally probably what they did. If you think of the shots in Psycho when the stabbing, you can go look at that on YouTube. Like there's not really a lot going on. It's kind of just we move the camera and then we cut, then we edit. It's fast and it's like it's very simplistic. I think if you watch it again, you kind of think, what the fuck was that? Whereas that was one of the most shocking things that had been ever put on the cinema at the time because of how novel it was. So I think it's intentional. I think it's very much trying to we're going to use some of these old-fashioned techniques to try and kind of give it. But I do think it's kind of a bit, it makes it a bit funny. There's a kind of like a funny element to which I don't think it's maybe that intentional. But
it's kind of one of those things that, like in a courtroom thriller, you would never ever notice something like that because the whole courtroom isn't going to pitch in a wave. But it's just that one boat scene at the end. I think there maybe would have been a better choice to have it be a little bit more static and maybe move away a little bit from that.
I mean,
it was a good catch, Ross, because it is a bit funny.
Yeah, I mean, and again, these are very, very minor sort of gripes or flaws that I find in this otherwise incredible movie.
Yeah, this has been really. It's been one of those films. It's like oh god damn it! How did I not watch this before? I feel like there's a little bit of a cinema education that's going on when watching.
For me, it was another one of those episodes of the podcast that made me thought we could have an entire podcast where we just watch movies The Simpsons did episodes on. And that's a series we could do for 30 years, no problem. There's enough material.
And most of the time it would be, as usual, The Simpsons is the kind of cultural lens that we have that we view things through, because that's what we watched. We hadn't seen
our childhood.
We hadn't seen all these obscure movies.
We should try and find some really because this is probably one of the more obscure movies The Simpsons reference that we've watched. We should try and find the most obscure movie The Simpsons did a whole episode parodying.
Yeah, I'm sure.
I mean, one thing that stood out to me about this movie, not stood out, but one actor that stood out to me in this was Jessica Lange. Because the first thing I saw her in, or that I recognized her in, was American Horror Story. And she played, because I don't know if you guys are familiar with it, but it's a different story for each season. And she plays the classy sort of, she's older by that point as well, but she does these sort of those series so well. And so when I recognize her from this, and it's just she oozes that class that from those those 60s and 70s era Hollywood starlets that you don't get anywhere else. You don't
at all, because people that carry themselves that way or act that way on film anymore. You are right, Ross. Which it goes towards the stylized. And I say stylized nature of this movie. It's not really stylized. It's just it's aping another form of cinema in a kind of a novel way. And this movie's 30 years old now, and it was aping 30-year-old movies then. And so, to us now, it feels very reminiscent of a period way, way before it actually is. I think, that's a testament to how well crafted it is.
Yeah, and most people probably didn't notice, which is maybe the point, and perhaps why this film doesn't have that same cultural. I've said that same cultural
possibly
impact.
Not, but like you guys mentioned, Simpsons. There's a number of shows as well that that reference this movie. Like Family Guy's done it, and most recently, like Rick and Morty has done it, and like they've actually said, because they have like that's the maid on the bottom of the car, like, haha, I'm doing the thing like from Cape Fear, and it's like very obvious, but
that's written by like media nerds, film TV nerds who end up writing TV shows.
Generation,
do you know what I mean? So there's So there's maybe something there. One other thing is the music in this, and we get to see it straight away. This, the horns that are blowing and the violin, and it's terrifying. It's actually the same. It's kind of remixed and kind of repurposed, but
like a DJ.
Principally, it's the same music, same music from the '60s film.
Oh, is it?
Yeah,
amazing.
Like literally the same music. It's not just not performed again.
I don't know. I'm not sure about if they re-recorded it, but it's
look
the
at
same...
this piss poor research.
No,
honestly, Sam, you're off for 5 weeks, and this is what you come into this podcast with.
That piercing, a main theme that we get to see throughout, and we get to see in the kind of like the terror moments, is the same one from the '60s. And again, it feels like that. It feels like a real throwback to a very different. Whereas maybe the '90s you'd have the non-diegetic music, which you'd have something playing in the background in a very Scorsese type of thing. Or you'd have something a little bit more. And it's from. I always wanted to be.
Ever since I can remember, I always wanted to be a famous Hollywood director.
Yes, yes, and so there's like I think that throwback element. But fuck me, this piece of music is terrifying. And again, it's in The Simpsons almost exactly.
How did they get away with that? How did they get away? I mean, again, like other TV shows have done, like Family Guy's done it with Star Wars, but they got permission. How is The Simpsons just basically going? Haha, no, that's ours. We own it, and people are going to remember it for our episode.
Parody law. There is a thing in America with comedy that you're allowed to parody something, and that's fine. You can't be taken to court for it.
There's parody, and then there's copy paste, Dave. You know what I mean?
Yeah, but it's very loose. You know what I mean? Like, and The Simpsons in the Cape Fear was what 94 probably. So 2 or 3 years
91.
after this, like. No, the Simpsons episode.
Oh, right.
It's season 5, so it'll be 94, 95. Like, it's long enough afterwards that I don't think Scorsese's chasing them down the street and saying, you've ripped off my music that I ripped off from that 60s movie.
I think because of the production, I think this was actually made in 93. I think it was part of season 4, but got held over. But the it makes you really laugh about.
Welcome to Simpsons Nerdcast.
Oh, 100%. It makes me laugh about how long it takes for Simpsons episodes to be made, because they probably, if you think about it, maybe
they'll have written
months.
The summer this movie came out.
Yep, exactly. Or maybe the year after, and it took so long for it to be produced and then actually put out on TV.
And then they've got to send it to Korea to have it animated.
Yeah, all of this, all the voicing, blah blah blah, all of that. Like fucking hell, The Simpsons was completely like a dead weight when it came to cultural references. So it's fucking lucky then that this movie was quite successful, because it could have come out, bombed, and they'd be like, fuck, we were referencing the 60s movie? Maybe? Like, very fun. So I think we could probably go... what about the second half of this movie where we just go into the thematic elements? Let's talk about pain, justice, redemption.
Look at Ross's face. It's 10 o'clock. We're not doing any more of this podcast.
But I think...
the second half... Are you on crack, sir?
But I think...
This was a good movie to watch, because it's maybe not the sort of movie that you would... I certainly would have been like, well, I'm sure it's good, but it's late and I don't want to have to watch it. And this is the sort of movie that I want us to be watching on the podcast. Movies that I wouldn't necessarily go out and see.
Yeah. And there's kind of we've talked about, I think, maybe the movie as presented, but I think if you dig under the surface of this, there'd be so much to explore in terms of like in terms of Robert De Niro's character. What does he want? Where does that drive for revenge come from? And then you compare it to the kind of failing moral integrity of Nick Nolte's character. All of these things, like there's so much in here that you could dive into, and we only have so much time. But it's one of those movies.
Usually we round out an episode at about an hour, Sam. So let's
chill out, Raz. We're good.
Let's
it's one of those episodes that one of those TV shows. Fuck's sake, one of those films that for me has
theatrical product.
Yeah, it's more maybe left like the production with me, like the nerdiness of it's they've aped Hitchcock, and they've done all these other things. Like that's what we've talked about, and we maybe haven't talked about like more of the thematic stuff, which we might do in a different film. For example, Spielberg was supposed to was originally lined up to make this, swapped it with Scorsese, who was Scorsese was going to make Schindler's List, and they swapped. Can you imagine?
Joe Pesci is a SS officer.
Well, can you imagine this about Spielberg? Spielberg
Joe
would turn.
Pesci is the Nazi Party.
Well, Sam.
Well, hold on. Spielberg would turn this
was
in.
Was going to cast Bill Murray, but outside of Spielberg, right? That's as the Robert De Niro character. You both laughed too soon there, which kind of revealed that you knew that trivia. But
No, I didn't. It's fucking insane.
Said Bill Murray. That's the
Bill
joke.
Murray.
So, and then also Drew Barrymore auditioned for the role of the daughter, and obviously she's got previous with Spielberg from E.T. And I think this movie would have been like had a much more touchy-feely, like happy ending. Whether like we would have had the Christmas scene, you know.
Spielberg would have made this about daddy issues. That's what he would have made this about, because that's what he loves.
I wonder why that is, though. Should we address why Spielberg's movies are all about like why daddies don't love people?
We haven't got time for that. But let's also imagine a Martin Scorsese Schindler's List. I mean, what the fuck would that look like?
Guys, I'm going to leave this episode. If we keep this shit, I will walk out.
All of the like really sweary like SS officers who are like they'd be like a gang.
But it shows that there's maybe that a lot that's been left on the table that we haven't talked about, because we're kind of fascinated by the movie making. We're not necessarily like, and that's to the criticism of the film. We're not necessarily that invested in it. I'm not invested really in why De Niro's done this. I'm not invested really in why these characters have such fear. I'm kind of just enjoying the ride. I'm eating my popcorn. It's great.
Well, that's a good thing, though.
It
is. But as Dave said at the beginning, you know, we remember the Shawshank Redemption for great performances and all this, but really we remember it for that feeling of freedom, the thematic elements to run through it. This film, not really interested in that. It's fear, it's ranching up the terror, it's references to other movies. They've got fucking Gregory Peck in it, for Christ's sake, for no fucking reason. Like, there's all these things that they do, and actually you could go, all right. I'm not saying that. I enjoyed it, but maybe that's to the film's detriment.
Yes. Anyway, but Ross has got to be at the coalface in 5 hours, so we better wrap this up. This has been a fun movie to do. We, as usual, will be back next week, where we will enjoy doing more podcasts with three people, because it really feels like we haven't done that in a while.
No guarantees.
The Imaginary Movie Podcast does not endorse this message. I can't remember what we're doing next week, so we're not going to get that wrong again today.
Probably something entirely discordant. And
I hope it's something shit.
Unlike this.
Shit.
Yeah, probably.
Schindler's List. That's what we're doing.
We are never doing that movie. Ever.
We couldn't be serious in this movie, Ross.
Yeah.
Just know. Just know.
The Boy in the Striped
You want to get
Pajamas.
cancelled, Ross? Because that's how you get cancelled. You have a podcast with your friends about Schindler's List, and you get put on all sorts of lists.
Oh my god! Quickly, end it quickly. This is it. Get out before it turns too terrible. We'll leave it there. See you next week.
I want you to edit that as the last thing.
Of course, I know that.
We should have like a please stand by like image, and all of us like doing like chaotic stuff. Please
just
stand
bars,
by.
just
and
bars
then
slamming
that smooth
over the YouTube visual.
That's
like,
smooth
clank.
jazz playing.
Sam was sent down for 11.5 years for crimes against podcasting.
Dun-dun.
Ross allegedly committed suicide in his cell. The topic is hotly debated on Reddit. Dave fled to Central America and has not been seen since. Are we still live on YouTube?
Oh yeah, 100%. Bye everyone.